Hello, and welcome to this video module on leverage buyout modeling, part 2 of 3. Let's continue looking at the Excel file that we started in the last module. We previously finished our adjustments column with a balanced column. All of our asset adjustments equaled our liability and equity adjustments. This module, we're going to focus on changes to debt and interest, including the cash sweep. So let's first flip back to our income statement and just complete a few of the formulas that were left blank last time. Our depreciation and amortization, you can see historically, had to do with our balance sheet, basically our net PP&E, and some sort of amortization factor. Well, it's still going to include that, but we also want to capture the change in the finance fees. So the formula gets a little bit more complicated. We're going to say that we have our amortization equal to balance sheet net PP&E minus cash flow, which is basically adding in the new PP&E, divided by our amortization years, depreciation years, which was 5, and we'll lock that cell. So that was our old formula. And we just want to add to that something that's going to capture the change in the finance fees on the balance sheet. And all we need to do there is take balance sheet I minus J. And I know we don't have J filled in yet. We will do that when we get to the next tab. Now, there's one bit that complicates this. Previously, we were able to grab all of our formulas and just copy them across. Having our adjustments column on the balance sheet sometimes won't let that work for us because we'll need to skip from H to J and skip the I column. So I think the income statement one is one where that happens. And yeah, you can see that number just kind of looks a bit out of whack. So what we need to do is instead of having that I there, I believe we wanted J and J, and we want J minus K. So that looks better. And that looks better. Okay, next let's move down to our interest numbers. And this is just going over what we did in our basic financial modeling, but we want to tie those to our debt schedule. So we're going to have term loan interest, and we're going to have sub-debt interest. I know we haven't done the calculations yet, and we're going to have line of credit interest. But let's just put those in. And those we can copy right across. And I'm going to leave that little formatting out for right now. Actually, no, I'll just fix it for us. Okay. So that's filled in all the lines on our income statement. I know everything's not corrected because we don't have our sub-debt interest, but we'll get to that later. Let's move over to our balance sheet. And let's start with row 18. So let's reflect the fact that those finance fees are being amortized. So our formula here is just going to be, let's have it equal the previous year less our opening amount, which we'll lock, divided by that year assumption. So divided by 8 years, and we'll lock that as well. And I'm just waiting for it to calculate. And there we go. And let's get that to the proper number of digits. And that one we can just copy over. So we've got our finance fees going away over time, and then we should see that being captured. It is being captured in our D&A line on the income statement. Let's move down one more row, and I know we touched on this in the last module, but goodwill is not going to change over time unless we had some reason to believe that the asset we bought is impaired, which we don't. And then let's just go down to retained earnings. I just want to walk us through this one. So how are we going to start here? We're going to say that this first year is equal to H and I, which is basically just going to be those negative fees, and then we add in, as we would normally do, our net income from the income statement. Subsequent years are just going to be the previous year plus the income statement's net income. Okay. Let's move over to our cash flow statement, and you can see we are completely unbalanced, but we know, for example, that we have some sub-debt that's going to come in, and it looks like if we just added it, that first year would balance. I'm just focusing down here on these check numbers. Okay, let's go to our cash flow statement. One tricky bit is that our beginning cash, now normally we just have our cash as the previous year's ending cash balance. Well, for this first year, we need to reflect the fact that we made a balance sheet adjustment. So that opening cash is simply that previous cash plus the adjustment, also known as zero. A couple other things that jump out at us. If we look at our cash numbers, these look pretty high, and it's when we look at the top of the balance sheet, that's a lot of cash for an LBO company to be generating. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that we haven't even reflected the fact that we're using cash to buy a business. So let's put that in. This cash used to purchase company is just going to be the negative of that total purchase price. But good news is we're not that negative on our cash because we did raise some new equity equal to LBO summary K12. And we also have some new borrowings. So we borrowed that from a term loan, and we borrowed that in the form of sub-debt. Now, we could also have tied these to the debt schedule, which we're going to get to next. Better yet, let's just tie those to the debt schedule right now. So we have our new borrowing on the term loan. We have our new borrowing on our sub-debt, which we haven't yet filled in. We have repayments on the term loan. And we have repayments, if any, on the sub-debt. And those we can just copy across, even though they aren't fully filled in just yet. Just one more line remaining on the cash flow statement. That's that sweep. And we're going to get to that later. That is a formula we're going to put in to basically take excess cash and use it to make payments on our term loan if cash is available. Let's go over to our debt schedule. Now, you'll see that we have a new box here compared to our basic financial model. We have a sub-debt box. So like we did in the financial model, I've just got our rate tied to the assumptions page. And beginning amount is going to be pretty similar to what we did in the term loan. We need to tie that to an opening balance sheet, and we had none. And then the next ones can just get tied to the ending amount. Likewise, new borrowing, we can make it very similar to what we did for the term loan. We basically said if the year is equal to the start year and the assumptions, then have the full amount borrowed, if not zero. So equals if F6, our year, is equal to our assumed start year, which I'm going to lock, then borrow this full amount, which is tied into our LBO summary page and the scenario assumption. If not, zero. And I need to just lock that second reference. So we'll just copy that across. So we could see that our term loan amount is properly borrowing in year one. Scheduled amortization. This one's a little bit different from what we did with the term loan because, as I mentioned earlier, the sub-debt is a non-amortizing loan. So it's out there, and then the year that we tell the model to, it just repays it in full. So the way we do that is if the year in which it's repaid is equal to the current year, then just have the negative opening amount. If not, zero. And we should get zeros across. And just to show you that in action, if I say that it's a interest only for 3 years, you can see it gets paid in year 3. But let's put that back to 10 years now. Last thing I want to touch on in the debt schedule is the sweep. And you can see that's tied to cash flow. So sweep, as I mentioned earlier, is a concept where excess cash is used to pay down the most senior debt out there. So in this case, we have a term loan, and you can see our sweep is equal to cash flow row 35. So let's just go through that formula. So first thing we want to do is say, if we've even turned our sweep on, so assumptions, and I'll show you how this works in a sec, but if our sweep assumption equals 1, and we should lock that sweep assumption, then we're going to go through these calculations. If not, we're not going to. Again, we have one of these mins. That's one of those Excel formulas that we use to make sure that we don't overpay something. So we want the min of our cash available to make debt payments plus the fact that we've already, plus any line of credit activity minus, we're going to go back to this, we did this when we did some of the calculations in the standard model, the basic modeling, but we need to reflect the fact that we have a minimum cash balance requirement. So the minimum of all that, or balance sheet H29, which is the previous amount, plus cash flow, basically the previous term loan amount, and any scheduled amortization on it. And if not, 0. Just needed to add an open parenthesis to that formula, and it all works. Now, this is another one of those that we can't just copy across because of that balance sheet adjustment column. So I'm going to put it in and then just make a couple of little changes where we should have, at the end, instead of I, we should have J and J. Correct. And we can copy that across. As we've now made all the income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement, and debt schedule changes, our model should balance, and we can see that it does. I just want to show you a few things just to prove that the sweep is working and that basically that the model is flowing. If we go back to assumptions, and let's change that, instead of having that sub-debt, this is just a far-fetched scenario, but instead of that having as a 10-year loan, let's just say it had to be repaid in 3 years. Well, first we want to make sure that our balance sheet still balances. It does. You can see that the sub-debt goes away, but our model is then just borrowing in the form of a line of credit. So let's just undo that one. Likewise, I mentioned when we first started that I figured that 8 years is the best term loan here. And let's see why. If we put in a 7-year term loan, make sure everything balances, it does, you could see that our term loan's being repaid, but we're making a pretty significant borrowing on the line of credit in outer years. And let's take it even down to a 5-year term loan. Basically seeing, look, I mean, the company really can't afford to make those amortization payments. So that's how, you know, a company would negotiate with a bank, and a bank would you know, kind of look at a company's model and say, all right, let's do an 8-year term loan for you, because that's what works. Company would probably want to build in a bit of a cushion as well. Let's turn our sweep on, but before I do that, we'll just show you that on the debt we've got no sweep. Likewise, nothing on the cash flow statement. Well, if we look at our company, we can see there's a pretty good bit of leftover cash early on. Not so much in year 3. We're hitting our minimum. So let's turn the sweep on and see what happens. So we click that box, and I'll show you how to do these Excel, what they're called Excel controls in the advanced modeling technique. But what we should see now is on our debt schedule, we do see the sweep coming in. Likewise on the cash flow. And we should have 2 years of basically minimum cash on the balance sheet. Let's go and do kind of just one more thing. Let's say, you know, I'll show you the sweep in better action. Let's say instead of a 50% margin, company just had a really great, somehow they negotiated, they drove their cost of goods way down. So let's just cut that by 75%. So our EBITDA margin, instead of being 25, is now 35. And since we have our sweep on, yes, we should see some massive sweeps. And you could see, yeah, a lot of excess cash flow being driven to drive down that term loan amount. And we'll see it on a cash flow statement. Likewise on the balance sheet, going from 700 to 5 to 340. So a lot of that excess cash. Just showing you that the sweep kicks in like we wanted to. I'm just going to undo those couple changes we made. But that's just proving that the model is working And in the final module of this LBO series, we're going to look at the IRR analysis and sensitivity analysis. Please join us.